8 Ways to Deal with People Who Disrespect You. That sentence is not just the title of this video, it is almost a warning, because if you stay with me until the end, the way you look at people, conflict, and yourself will change. Have you ever noticed how some people consistently treat you as if your opinion doesn't matter? Not once, not accidentally, but again and again. They interrupt you, ignore your boundaries, speak to you with subtle contempt, and over time something dangerous happens. You start questioning your own value. I'm not talking about random rudeness. I'm talking about systematic disrespect. The kind that slowly eats away at your confidence and makes you doubt yourself. When I was younger, I handled this the wrong way. I took everything personally, tried to explain myself, tried to prove my worth, tried to be understood. All of that gave me nothing but exhaustion, anger, and sleepless nights. It took years, and the wisdom passed down through generations in Jewish tradition, to understand a simple but uncomfortable truth. People who disrespect you are rarely reacting to who you are. They are reacting to who they are. Jewish wisdom teaches something very different from modern psychology trends. It doesn't start with fixing others. It starts with mastery over yourself, your reactions, your boundaries, and your attention. In this video, I will share 8 real practical ways to deal with people who disrespect you. These are not motivational slogans and not soft affirmations. These are tools, tested by life, sharpened by experience, and passed from generation to generation. Here is my promise to you. If you apply even half of what you will hear today, people who once disturbed your peace will lose their power over you. Some will change their behavior. Others will quietly disappear from your life. Either way, you will become calmer, stronger, and harder to shake. Before we go any further, ask yourself honestly if there is someone in your life who makes you feel smaller than you are. A colleague, a friend, or a family member. Keep that person in mind as we move forward. And one more thing before we begin. If you want clarity, strength, and self-respect that doesn't depend on anyone's approval, subscribe to this channel. Here we talk about power, wisdom, discipline, and the quiet strength that comes from understanding how life truly works. Now let's begin with the first principle, the one most men completely misunderstand. Don't take it personally. The first principle sounds simple, almost obvious, and that is exactly why most people ignore it. When someone disrespects you, your instinct is to assume that the problem is you. You replay their words in your head, analyze your behavior, search for mistakes, and quietly put yourself on trial. I did this for years. Every sharp comment, every dismissive look, every sarcastic remark felt like proof that I was lacking something. I thought that if I adjusted myself enough, explained myself clearly enough, or proved my value convincingly enough, the disrespect would stop. It never did. Jewish wisdom teaches something radically different. It teaches that a man must first separate his inner worth from the noise of other people. Most disrespect has very little to do with you as a person. It is far more often a reflection of someone else's inner chaos, their insecurity, their frustration, their need to feel superior. Let me give you a real example. Years ago, a colleague once told me, very bluntly, that I worked too slowly. I took it to heart immediately. I questioned my competence, pushed myself harder, lost sleep over it, and tried to prove him wrong. A week later, I discovered that he complained about everyone the same way. It was his habit, not my failure. This is a pattern you will see again and again. People who habitually disrespect others are rarely precise or fair. They project, they unload, they release pressure by pushing it onto someone else. Here is the practical rule. When someone disrespects you, pause and ask yourself a simple question. Is this objectively true, or is this simply their emotional state speaking? In most cases, you will realize that you are reacting to their mood, not to a real assessment of your value. Taking things personally is emotional self-sabotage. It hands control of your inner world to people who have not earned that power. The moment you stop internalizing every slight, something shifts. Their words lose weight. Their tone loses authority. This does not mean you ignore reality or refuse all feedback. It means you choose carefully what deserves your attention and what does not. A calm, grounded man does not absorb every comment thrown in his direction. He evaluates, keeps what is useful, and discards the rest without emotional damage. Master this first principle, and you will notice something important. People who rely on disrespect to provoke a reaction begin to lose interest. When there is no emotional reward, their behavior often fades on its own. And this is only the beginning. The second principle builds on this and shows you how distance, not confrontation, often becomes your greatest advantage. The second principle is where many men get confused. They think that strength always looks like confrontation. They believe that if someone disrespects them, the only honorable response is to argue, explain, defend, or fight back. Jewish wisdom teaches the opposite. Very often the strongest move is distance. Distance does not mean weakness, avoidance, or fear. It means refusing to participate in a game that drains your energy and gives nothing in return. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, engaging with them emotionally only feeds their behavior. They gain attention, reaction, and control. I learned this lesson the hard way. In my early years, I worked with a colleague who constantly tested me. He interrupted me, questioned my decisions, and subtly tried to assert dominance. I responded the way most people do. I argued. I explained myself. I tried to prove my competence. The result was predictable. I became exhausted and his behavior intensified. Then I changed my strategy. I stopped reacting emotionally. I did my work well, communicated only what was necessary, and refused to engage in his provocations. I didn't insult him. I didn't confront him publicly. I simply withdrew my emotional availability. Something interesting happened. Within a few months, he lost interest. Without resistance to push against, without emotion to feed on, he moved on to someone else. That is how many disrespectful people operate. They are not looking for truth or resolution. They are looking for reaction. Here is how you apply this in real life. Emotional distance starts with boundaries. You limit how much access someone has to your time, your energy, and your attention. You keep conversations short and neutral. You avoid oversharing. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not listening. This also means learning to say no without guilt. Not loudly, not aggressively. Simply clearly. A calm, firm no is one of the most powerful boundary-setting tools a man can use. You do not owe explanations to people who repeatedly disrespect you. Distance can also be internal. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop imagining better comebacks. You stop giving someone free rent in your thoughts. Jewish wisdom places enormous value on guarding the mind, because whatever controls your thoughts eventually controls your life. This principle alone can radically reduce stress. When you stop engaging with disrespect on an emotional level, your nervous system calms down. Your decisions become clearer. Your self-respect strengthens. And here is the key insight. Distance is not permanent exile. It is strategic positioning. Some people adjust their behavior when they realize access to you is not guaranteed. Others fall away completely. Both outcomes work in your favor. In the next part, we will talk about something even more powerful. Calm. Not passive calm, but the kind of calm that quietly establishes dominance and exposes emotional weakness without saying a word. Stay calm and take control. The third principle is where real power begins to show. Calmness is often misunderstood as passivity, softness, or submission. In reality, calm is one of the most dominant psychological positions a man can take. Jewish wisdom treats emotional control not as politeness, but as strength. People who disrespect others are often seeking one thing above all else: an emotional reaction. Anger, defensiveness, irritation, raised voice. Any of these signals tell them that they have influence over you. The moment you react emotionally, you have already lost ground. I remember a situation at a meeting where a colleague openly tried to humiliate me. He interrupted, raised his voice, and framed his comments as jokes. Every instinct in my body pushed me to respond sharply and put him in his place. Instead, I paused. I took a breath. I stayed silent for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then I spoke calmly. No raised voice, no sarcasm, no defensiveness. Just a short, clear response. The room changed instantly. His behavior suddenly looked excessive and unstable, while mine appeared controlled and confident. Without attacking him, I had shifted the balance of power. This is not accidental. Calm exposes emotional weakness. When someone is agitated and you are not, the contrast works in your favor. Others notice it, even if nothing is said out loud. Here is how you train this in practice. The moment you feel provoked, delay your response. not forever, just long enough to regain control. A slow breath. A pause of 2 or 3 seconds. This small gap breaks the automatic reaction that most people fall into. When you speak, keep your words minimal. Calm people do not over-explain. They do not justify themselves excessively. They state what needs to be said and stop. Silence after a calm statement is often more powerful than any argument. Jewish wisdom emphasizes restraint because restraint preserves dignity. A man who cannot control his emotions can be controlled by others. A man who controls his emotions becomes difficult to manipulate. This does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending nothing affects you. It means choosing when and how you express them. You do not hand emotional access to someone who has already shown you disrespect. As you practice calmness, something subtle but important happens. People start adjusting their behavior around you. Some become more respectful. Others feel uncomfortable and create distance themselves. Again, both outcomes serve you. In the next part, we will move from internal control to external clarity. How to speak directly and set boundaries without aggression, without apology, and without losing respect. Speak directly without aggression. The fourth principle is where many men fail, not because they are weak, but because they confuse two very different things: aggression and clarity. They either stay silent and tolerate disrespect, or they explode and damage their own position. Jewish wisdom teaches a third path: directness without emotional leakage. Disrespect often continues for one simple reason. People do not see your boundaries, not because they are blind, but because you never clearly show them. Silence is often interpreted as permission. For a long time, I avoided direct conversations. I thought that staying quiet was being wise. In reality, I was training others to treat me casually. When I finally learned to speak clearly, without anger and without apology, the dynamic changed almost immediately. Here is the key distinction. Aggression tries to overpower. Clarity establishes reality. When you speak from clarity, you are not attacking the person. You are naming the behavior and stating what is acceptable. A simple example. Instead of saying, "You're always disrespectful," which invites defensiveness and conflict, you say, "I don't accept being interrupted. Let me finish." Short, calm, final. Jewish wisdom values precise language. Not emotional language, not dramatic language. Precise language creates structure, and structure creates respect. When you speak directly, keep 3 rules in mind. First, describe the behavior, not the person. Second, state your boundary, not your emotions. Third, stop talking. The more you explain, the weaker your position becomes. This kind of speech feels uncomfortable at first, especially if you are used to pleasing others. But discomfort is the price of self-respect. Once people realize that crossing your boundaries leads to immediate, calm correction, most of them adjust. Some will not. And that information is valuable. It tells you who is incapable of respecting you no matter how politely you ask. Directness does not require volume. It does not require threats. It requires certainty. A man who knows what he allows does not need to argue about it. As you practice this principle, you will notice something subtle. You start respecting yourself more, and when self-respect becomes visible, others respond to it. In the next part, we will talk about a tool that surprises many people: humor. Used correctly, it can neutralize disrespect without conflict and without losing face. Use humor as a status weapon. The fifth principle surprises many men because humor is rarely associated with strength. Most people think jokes are for entertaining, easing tension, or gaining approval. Jewish wisdom treats humor very differently. When used correctly, humor is a tool of status and control. Disrespect often relies on seriousness. The other person wants to frame the interaction as heavy, emotional, or uncomfortable. The moment you respond with calm humor, you break that frame and take control of the situation. I once worked with a man who constantly made sarcastic remarks about my work in front of others. He never attacked directly. He hid behind jokes. If I reacted defensively, I looked weak. If I confronted him aggressively, I looked unstable. So I chose a third option. One day, after another sarcastic comment, I smiled and said calmly, "I'm glad you're following my work so closely. Not everyone pays that much attention." The room laughed. He stopped speaking. Why did this work? Because humor exposed the imbalance. I wasn't offended. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to win. I showed that I was above the game. Here is the rule. Humor must never be aggressive. Aggressive humor turns you into the same person you are trying to neutralize. Instead, aim for light, detached, confident responses that show emotional independence. Good humor does three things at once. It keeps your dignity intact, it removes emotional tension, and it signals that you are not threatened. This kind of humor works especially well in public settings. It allows you to defend yourself without escalating conflict and without forcing others to take sides. But there is an important boundary. Humor is not for people who consistently violate your limits. It is a tool for neutralizing occasional disrespect, not for managing deeply toxic individuals. Those require distance, not jokes. When used wisely, humor sends a powerful message. You are comfortable, you are grounded, you are not easily shaken, and people instinctively respect that. In the next part, we will move to a deeper principle: forgiveness without weakness, and why letting go is often the most strategic move you can make. Forgive without becoming weak. The sixth principle is one of the most misunderstood ideas about strength. Many men hear the word forgiveness and immediately associate it with weakness, submission, or forgetting what was done to them. Jewish wisdom makes a very sharp distinction here. Forgiveness is not about excusing behavior. It is about reclaiming control over your inner world. When you hold on to resentment, you stay emotionally connected to the person who disrespected you. You replay the situation, imagine different outcomes, and carry the weight with you long after the moment has passed. In other words, they continue to influence you even when they are not present. I learned this through a painful experience with someone I trusted. I was publicly put in an uncomfortable position, and the humiliation stayed with me for a long time. At first, I thought holding on to anger meant I had dignity. In reality, it meant I was still trapped in the situation. Forgiveness changed that. Not because the other person deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I let go internally, but I did not forget the lesson. I adjusted my boundaries and never placed myself in the same position again. This is the key rule. Forgive internally. Remember strategically. Jewish wisdom values memory because memory protects you from repeating mistakes. Forgiveness clears emotional poison. Memory preserves intelligence. On a practical level, forgiveness begins with honesty. You acknowledge what you feel: anger, disappointment, frustration, without acting on it. Then you decide not to carry it forward. You release the emotional charge, not the responsibility. This does not require reconciliation. It does not require conversation. It does not require closure from the other person. It is an internal decision. Men who refuse to forgive often believe they are protecting themselves. In reality, they are feeding their own stress. Letting go is not forgetting. Letting go is choosing not to be controlled. Once you practice this principle, you will notice that past disrespect loses its emotional power. You remember what happened clearly, but it no longer triggers you. That is real strength. In the next part, we will move from internal discipline to external influence. The role of your environment and why the people you allow around you quietly shape your level of self-respect. Choose your environment carefully. The seventh principle shifts the focus from individual interactions to something far more powerful: your environment. Jewish wisdom has always emphasized this idea. A person is shaped, slowly and quietly, by the people around him. You may believe you are strong enough to withstand constant negativity, but over time, even the strongest mind absorbs its surroundings. Disrespect does not exist in isolation. It is often reinforced by proximity. When you stay too long around people who belittle you, interrupt you, or subtly undermine you, your internal standards begin to erode. Not dramatically, but gradually. It took me years to understand this. I noticed that after spending time with certain people, I felt drained, tense, and smaller. After spending time with others, I felt calm, focused, and clear. Nothing obvious had happened. No arguments, no insults, just a difference in energy and tone. Jewish wisdom phrases this simply: show me your circle, and I will show you your future. The people you allow into your daily life shape what you tolerate, what you expect, and how you see yourself. This does not mean cutting everyone off impulsively. It means auditing your environment honestly. Who respects your boundaries? Who listens when you speak? Who subtly competes with you or dismisses you? Once you see these patterns, act quietly. Reduce time with those who drain you. Increase time with those who support and challenge you in healthy ways. Seek out men who value discipline, clarity, and self-respect. Environment works silently, but relentlessly. If you place yourself among people who normalize disrespect, you will constantly fight an uphill battle. If you place yourself among people who value dignity, respect becomes natural. This principle applies everywhere: work, friendships, even family dynamics. You cannot always change people, but you can change how close they are to you. When your environment improves, many problems solve themselves without confrontation. Disrespect fades because it no longer has access to you. In the final part, we will rise above the moment entirely and look at disrespect from the highest perspective: time. This is where everything comes together. See everything from the height of time. The eighth principle is the highest one, and it ties everything together. Jewish wisdom places enormous value on perspective, especially the perspective of time. Many situations feel overwhelming only because you are standing too close to them. When someone disrespects you, the emotional reaction wants to pull you into the present moment and trap you there. Anger narrows your vision. Ego demands immediate resolution. But wisdom asks a different question. How much will this matter in a year, or even in a month? I remember situations that once felt humiliating and unbearable. At the time, they occupied my thoughts for days. Years later, they barely register. What remained was not the insult, but the lesson it taught me about boundaries, restraint, and self-respect. People who disrespect you are often temporary characters in a much longer story. They enter your life, test you, and leave. If you allow them to define your emotional state, you give a minor role far too much influence over the entire narrative. Seeing from the height of time changes your behavior immediately. You stop chasing small victories. You stop proving points that do not matter. You preserve your energy for what actually shapes your future. Here is the practical application. When you feel provoked, pause and imagine yourself 1 year from now. Ask whether this moment deserves your attention, your anger, or your reaction. Most of the time, the answer will be no. This perspective does not make you passive, it makes you selective. You still set boundaries, you still speak clearly, but you do so without urgency, without emotional pressure, and without losing your center. Jewish wisdom teaches that dignity is built over a lifetime. One reaction can weaken it, one restrained response can strengthen it. When you combine all 8 principles, not taking things personally, creating distance, staying calm, speaking clearly, using humor wisely, forgiving without weakness, choosing your environment, and seeing from the height of time, something fundamental changes. You stop reacting to disrespect. You rise above it. In the final section, I will bring all of this together and show you how to turn these principles into a daily way of life. Not just ideas you understand, but habits you live by. We've reached the end of this conversation, but if you've truly been listening, this is not the end. It's the point where everything we discussed begins to matter. You've now seen 8 ways to deal with people who disrespect you. Not tricks, not manipulations, but principles rooted in Jewish wisdom and lived experience. Principles that do not rely on changing others, but on strengthening yourself. Here is the core truth that ties everything together. You cannot control how people behave, but you fully control how much access they have to your emotions, your time, and your inner world. When you stop taking things personally, you protect your inner stability. When you create distance, you deny disrespect its fuel. When you stay calm, you expose emotional weakness without a fight. When you speak clearly, you establish boundaries without aggression. When you use humor wisely, you maintain status without conflict. When you forgive without becoming weak, you free yourself without becoming naive. When you choose your environment carefully, you raise the standard of what surrounds you. And when you see everything from the height of time, you stop wasting energy on what cannot shape your future. None of this happens overnight. Jewish wisdom never promises instant transformation. It promises something better: lasting change through discipline and awareness. These principles work when they are practiced quietly, consistently, and without drama. Start small. Pause before reacting. Choose one boundary to reinforce. Let one provocation pass without response. Step back and observe instead of engaging. These small decisions compound faster than you think. A year from now, the people who once disturbed your peace may still be there, or they may be gone. But what will certainly be different is you. Calmer, clearer, harder to shake, more grounded in who you are. And this is the final reminder I want to leave you with. Respect from others is never the starting point. Self-respect is. When that becomes visible, the world adjusts. If this video gave you clarity, strength, or a new way of seeing your life, subscribe to this channel. Here we explore wisdom, discipline, and the quiet power that comes from understanding how life truly works. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these 8 principles do you struggle with the most right now? Write it in the comments. Your answer may help someone else who is silently dealing with the same thing. Stay steady, stay disciplined, and remember, the strongest men rarely need to raise their voice.